Roberto Salvatierra's phone had rung for the 20th time in the last 20 minutes. His hand trembled as he held the device, and the voice on the other end of the line was a whirlwind of rage in Mandarin that he couldn't comprehend. The words tumbled over each other like furious waves, and he could only distinguish a few numbers, quantities that sounded terrifying, threatening. The contract with the Chinese investors was crumbling before his eyes, and he had no one, absolutely no one, who could save him at that moment. His official translator had resigned the night before, fed up with the impossible schedules and the stress of multi-million-dollar negotiations. The other 3 interpreters he had contacted weren't answering his calls. It was Friday afternoon, and by Monday morning, he had to present the final agreement or lose $200 million. Before continuing, tell us in the comments what city you're joining us from. Enjoy the story. On the 32nd floor of the Salvatierra Corp building, the air conditioning hummed with an artificial chill that contrasted with the suffocating heat of despair. Roberto paced his office, his Italian shoes clattering against the travertine marble, each step a reminder of the world of luxury he had built and which now threatened to collapse. His assistant, Marcella, a 40-year-old woman in a designer suit and with a calculating gaze, watched him from the doorway with a mix of feigned concern and barely disguised satisfaction. She had been waiting for years for him to fail, to make a mistake big enough for the board of directors to replace him, preferably with her. Meanwhile, 27 floors below, in the building's lobby, Daniela Contreras had just entered, pushing her delivery cart. She wore the orange uniform of Rapido Envios, stained with sweat after climbing and descending stairs for 8 hours straight. Her thermal backpack weighed on her shoulders, full of urgent documents and small packages she had to deliver before 6 p.m. She was 26, but the dark circles under her eyes made her look older. She hadn't slept well in weeks. She spent her nights caring for her mother, who was battling a kidney disease that required dialysis 3 times a week. Medical insurance only covered a fraction of the expenses, and Daniela worked 3 different jobs to keep her family afloat. Daniela checked her delivery list on her cracked screen cell phone, which she had bought second-hand. Floor 32. Roberto Salvatierra's office. Urgent documents from a law firm. She sighed and headed for the elevators, passing decorative water fountains and exotic plants that probably cost more than her entire annual salary. The security guards looked at her with that mix of indifference and disdain that wealthy people reserve for those who serve them. She was already used to it. She showed her delivery ID, signed the visitor log, and waited for access to be authorized. The elevator was a capsule of glass and stainless steel that ascended silently, showing her the city stretching below like a map of lights and shadows. Daniela saw her reflection in the mirrored walls of the elevator and felt a pang of shame. Her brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, some strands escaping and sticking to her sweaty forehead. Her orange uniform was 2 sizes too big, inherited from a colleague who had left the job, but it wasn't the clothes that hurt the most. It was the look people gave her, as if she were invisible, as if she didn't exist beyond her function of delivering packages. What no one in that building knew, what no one at her job knew, was that Daniela Contreras possessed a gift that very few people in the world had. She could speak 6 languages fluently, not because she had attended expensive schools or prestigious universities. No, Daniela had learned languages in the oldest and most genuine way, out of necessity, out of survival, out of pure, insatiable curiosity. When she was a child, her mother had worked in the homes of foreign families, cleaning and cooking for diplomats and businessmen who rotated through the city. Daniela accompanied her after school, and while her mother mopped floors and ironed shirts, she sat in the kitchens listening to conversations in English, French, Mandarin, German. She had a photographic memory that her primary school teacher had noticed, but which she could never develop because there was no money for special education. So Daniela had learned on her own, listening, repeating, memorizing patterns and grammatical structures while sorting dirty laundry. In high school, when other teenagers went to parties, she stayed up until dawn watching subtitled movies, downloading free language apps, following YouTube channels of teachers teaching from distant countries. She had learned Korean by obsessing over Asian dramas during a particularly lonely summer. Italian had come later when she worked 6 months in a pizzeria run by an immigrant from Naples who taught her expressions while she washed dishes. But no one knew this. On her delivery driver resume, there was no space to put proficiency in 6 languages. All that mattered was that she could drive a motorcycle, carry 20 kilograms, and make deliveries on time. The elevator stopped on the 32nd floor with a soft ding that seemed too elegant for the moment. The doors opened, revealing a corridor with cream carpet, frosted glass walls, and contemporary art that Daniela didn't understand but sensed cost fortunes. She walked to the reception, where a secretary with perfect makeup and gel nails looked her up and down with a barely perceptible sneer of disdain. Daniela already knew that look. She had seen it 1,000 times on 1,000 different faces. "Delivery for Mr. Salvatierra," Daniela said in a neutral, professional voice, the voice she had perfected so as not to seem too submissive or too proud. She extended the manila envelope with legal documents bearing the UArgent stamp in red letters. The secretary took it without even touching Daniela's fingers, as if contact could transmit poverty. "Wait here," the woman ordered before disappearing down a side hallway. Daniela stood by the reception. Her delivery cart awkwardly parked to one side. She could hear raised voices coming from a nearby office. One of the voices was clearly annoyed, frustrated, almost on the verge of panic. It was a male voice, speaking in broken Spanish, trying to communicate with someone. And then she heard another voice, distorted by a speakerphone connection, speaking fast and furious Mandarin. Daniela understood every word. The man on the speakerphone was saying it was the last time he would tolerate unprofessionalism, that the contract was cancelled, that they would sue for breach of agreed terms. Her instinct was to ignore it. It wasn't her problem. She was just a delivery person, but something in the desperate tone of the other voice made her hesitate. And then she heard something that chilled her. The man on the speakerphone mentioned a children's hospital. He mentioned charity funds that depended on that contract, sick children who needed treatment. Daniela thought of her mother, of the endless hours in the dialysis ward, of the medical bills that arrived every month like death sentences. She thought of all the children waiting in hospital rooms, with the same dark circles under her eyes. Without thinking too much, without giving herself time to regret, Daniela walked towards the office from where the voices came. The door was ajar. From the threshold, she saw a man in his 40s, dark hair with grey at the temples, a suit that probably cost more than her motorcycle, holding his head in both hands as he stared at a phone on speaker on his desk. The voice was still shouting in Mandarin, and Daniela understood that it was giving him a 6-0-second ultimatum before hanging up permanently. "Excuse me," Daniela said in a trembling voice, aware that she was crossing an invisible but ineludible line. The man looked up sharply, and for a second seemed furious at the interruption, but there was something in his gaze that Daniela recognized. It was the same look she had seen in the mirror after every hospital shift with her mother, after every bill she couldn't pay. It was the look of someone completely lost. "I can help," Daniela said. "I speak Mandarin." And before the man could answer, before his brain could process the absolute improbability of the situation, Daniela took the phone and began to speak in fluent, perfect Mandarin, without a detectable accent. Words flowed from her mouth like a river that had been dammed for too long. She introduced herself as Mr. Salvatierra's temporary assistant. She profusely apologized for the communication confusion. She explained that there had been a technical misunderstanding with previous translators. Her voice was soft but firm, respectful but not servile. She used appropriate courtesies, correct idioms that indicated education and respect for the interlocutor's culture. Gradually, she could feel the tension on the other end of the line begin to decrease. Roberto Salvatierra looked at her as if he was witnessing a miracle. His mouth was slightly open, his green eyes fixed on this delivery person in an orange uniform who had suddenly saved what appeared to be an inevitable financial disaster. Daniela continued speaking, taking quick notes on the desk's notepad, clarifying contract terms, proposing a new date for the final review video conference. She spoke for 15 minutes straight, and when she finally hung up the phone, the silence in the office was deafening. Roberto took a deep breath, like someone who had just emerged from water after nearly drowning. "Who are you?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. And Daniela, suddenly aware of what she had just done, of the line she had crossed, felt her cheeks flush. "I'm Daniela Contreras. I came to deliver some documents. I just heard you needed help, and I speak Mandarin, so I thought." Her voice trailed off. She suddenly felt ridiculous, small, completely out of place. But before Roberto could reply, the office door burst open. Marcela, the executive assistant, entered with an expression of horror and fury. "What is this woman doing here?" she demanded. "Roberto, this is completely inappropriate. This is a confidential business conversation, and you've allowed a random delivery person to listen to sensitive information." Her voice was sharp as a knife, and Daniela felt herself instinctively shrink. She just saved a $200 million contract that you couldn't fix, Roberto replied. And there was a new edge to his voice. Marcella looked at him as if he had lost his mind. That's impossible. This woman can't have done anything important. She probably doesn't even understand what the contract is about. And then she turned to Daniela with a cruel smile. Tell me, dear, did you study at a prestigious university? Do you have a degree in international relations or finance? The way Marcella said dear made Daniela want to disappear. It was the tone you use for a small child who has done something adorably stupid. No, Daniela replied in a low voice. I didn't finish university. I work as a delivery person. And in those words, in that admission, she felt the weight of every dream she had had to abandon, every opportunity she had never had. Marcella laughed, a loud, fake sound. Exactly, Roberto. This is ridiculous. You can't trust someone without credentials to handle negotiations of this caliber. I've been organizing meetings with professional translators from recognized agencies. Give me until tomorrow, and we'll have someone appropriate, someone with the necessary qualifications. Her emphasis on the word appropriate was like a slap. But Roberto wasn't listening. He was looking at the notes Daniela had scribbled on the pad. Lines in Mandarin, interspersed with Spanish translations. Technical terms that she had translated with astonishing precision. How many languages do you speak? He asked suddenly. Daniela looked at him, confused. 6, she replied. English, French, Mandarin, German, Italian, and Korean. I learned on my own. I don't have certificates or anything formal. I just spoke them for years with different people. Marcella's face had turned red. That means nothing. Anyone can say they speak languages. She probably only knows a few basic phrases. Roberto, if you trust this woman and something goes wrong, it will be your responsibility. The board of directors won't be happy when they find out you put a multi-million-dollar contract in the hands of a delivery person. She emphasized the last word as if it were a contagious disease. Roberto remained silent for a long moment. Daniela could feel his gaze evaluating her, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, he spoke. I need you to stay. The Chinese investors want a video conference tomorrow at 9 a.m. to review the final terms of the contract. I need you to be there as an interpreter. I'll pay you as an external consultant. Standard industry rate for simultaneous interpretation service. Daniela's eyes widened. She knew how much professional interpreters charged for that kind of work. It was more than she earned in a month of deliveries. You can't be serious, Marcella intervened. Roberto, this is professional suicide. What will the board think when they see a delivery driver, without formal education, representing the company in an international negotiation? They'll think you've gone mad. And she was right about one thing. Image is everything in this world. And Daniela knew exactly how she would look sitting at a conference table, surrounded by executives in designer suits. I don't care what they think, Roberto replied. And there was a new determination in his voice. All I care about is saving this contract, and she's the only person who has been able to communicate effectively with them in the last 24 hours. Marcella, prepare the paperwork to hire Miss Contreras as a temporary consultant. And then he turned to Daniela. You'll need to be here tomorrow at 8:30 to review the documents before the call. Can you do that, Daniela? She nodded. Although her mind was a whirlwind of contradictory thoughts, she had to call her boss at Rapido Envios to tell him she couldn't work tomorrow. She had to rearrange her mother's hospital schedule. She had to find clothes that weren't the orange uniform. But most of all, she had to process the fact that her life had just changed in a matter of minutes, and she didn't know if it was for the better or for absolute disaster. That night, Daniela barely slept. She stayed awake in her small one-bedroom apartment, the one she shared with her mother, going over everything she knew about international business contracts in her mind. It wasn't much. She had read some articles online over the years. She had overheard conversations when she worked in those rich families' homes, but she had never been directly involved in these types of negotiations. Doubt gnawed at her like acid. What if she made a mistake? What if her translation wasn't accurate enough? What if Marcella was right, and she was nothing more than an imposter without the necessary qualifications? Her mother, Doña Elena, found her sitting at the small kitchen table at 3 a.m., surrounded by printed papers with financial terms she had looked up online. "My daughter, what are you doing awake?" the woman asked in a weak voice. She was 55, but looked 70, her body ravaged by years of heavy work and illness. Daniela explained what had happened, and to her surprise, her mother smiled. "I always knew that gift of yours for languages would take you somewhere. Since you were a child, you listened and learned like no one else. Don't let anyone make you feel less for not having a piece of paper that says you're intelligent. You know what you know, and that's what matters." But her mother's words, though well-intentioned, couldn't completely calm the anxiety bubbling in her stomach. At 6 a.m., Daniela showered and put on the only semi-formal clothes she had, a white blouse she had bought at a second-hand store and black pants that were a little too big. She had no makeup beyond a cheap lipstick, and her shoes were athletic because she couldn't afford heels. She looked at herself in the broken bathroom mirror and sighed. This would have to be enough. She arrived at the Salvatierra Court building at 8:15, with sweaty palms and her heart beating so hard she thought everyone could hear it. This time, when she passed through the lobby, the security guards looked at her differently. Someone had informed them she was coming, and they gave her a special visitor badge without the disdainful glances of yesterday. The elevator took her again to the 32nd floor, but now the receptionist greeted her with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Salvatierra is waiting for you in Conference Room B," she informed. Conference Room B was an intimidating space with glass walls overlooking the city, a mahogany table that seemed 3 meters long, and leather chairs that probably cost more than her entire apartment's furniture. Roberto was already there reviewing documents, and next to him were 3 more people: a serious-looking lawyer with thick-rimmed glasses, a financial analyst who seemed to be Daniela's age and kept typing on his laptop, and Marcella, who looked at her with an expression that could freeze hell. "Good morning," Roberto said, standing up to greet her. He looked more rested than yesterday, though there was tension in the way his shoulders remained stiff. "These are Mr. Mendoza, our corporate lawyer, and Javier, senior analyst. You already know Marcella. They will be on the call with us, but you will be in charge of all interpretation. The Chinese investors are 4 people: Mr. Wang, who is the consortium's chairman, Miss Li, financial director, Mr. Chen, legal advisor, and Miss Tin Sang, who handles international relations. Do you have any questions?" Daniela swallowed. "I need to review the contract terms to make sure I can correctly translate all the technical vocabulary. I don't want any misunderstandings from using incorrect terms." Her voice sounded firmer than she felt. Roberto nodded and handed her a printed copy of the contract, a 5-3-page document full of legal clauses and financial projections. Marcella audibly snorted. "I hope you know how to read commercial contracts," she commented with venomous sweetness. "It's not exactly like translating restaurant menus." Daniela ignored the comment and began to read. Her eyes moved quickly over the pages, her brain processing information and automatically searching for the appropriate Mandarin translations for each term. There was a clause about intellectual property rights that would require the specific word times Xixi-Quan asterisk. There were terms about mergers and acquisitions that translated as times bingo asterisk. There were sections on corporate responsibility that needed precise vocabulary, so as not to sound like the company was admitting guilt in advance. Daniela took mental notes, creating an instant glossary in her head. As she read, she didn't notice Roberto observing her with a mix of curiosity and amazement. The way she processed the document, the speed with which her eyes moved, the occasional movement of her lips as she silently pronounced a translation to verify it sounded correct. There was something almost supernatural in the intensity of her concentration. Marcella, on the other hand, looked at her with increasing annoyance, as if Daniela's mere presence was a personal insult. At 9 o'clock, the large screen on the conference room wall came to life, showing 4 serious faces from an office in Shanghai. Miss Huang, a man in his 60s with completely white hair and a penetrating gaze, spoke first in formal Mandarin. "Good morning. We hope that this time communication will be more effective than yesterday. We have lost patience with the constant confusions and misunderstandings." Daniela instantly translated, her voice clear and professional, maintaining the implicit warning tone of the message. The meeting began, and Daniela immersed herself in the work of simultaneous interpretation, something she had never done formally, but found she could handle with an ease that surprised even herself. When Roberto explained the tax benefits of the agreement, Daniela translated not only the words but the cultural context, adjusting expressions to make sense within the Chinese business framework. When Miss Li asked technical questions about the third quarter financial projections, Daniela translated Javier's answers with mathematical precision, without losing any numbers or percentages. But then came a tense moment. Mr. Chen, the Chinese legal advisor, pointed out a specific clause on page 27 of the contract that worried him. He spoke quickly and used specific legal vocabulary that even many native Mandarin speakers would find difficult. Daniela listened carefully, processing not only the words but the legal implications behind them. "This clause," she translated, "specifies that any dispute will be resolved in international courts, but it does not clarify which national law would apply in cases of ambiguity. This represents a significant risk for our consortium, as we could be submitting to foreign jurisdiction without adequate protections. Roberto frowned. That was not a problem he had anticipated. He looked at Mr. Mendoza, who began to explain the company's legal position, but did so in Spanish, full of convoluted legal terms that would be difficult to translate in a way that made sense. Daniela listened carefully and then, instead of translating word for word, she reformulated the explanation in Mandarin using analogies that would be culturally appropriate for the Chinese investors. She explained that the intention of the clause was to protect both parties, not to favor one over the other, and proposed that they add a specific paragraph clarifying that a neutral international arbitration panel would be used. Let's play a game for those paying attention. Type the word contract in the comments. Only those who made it this far will understand. Let's continue. Mr. Huang nodded slowly, considering the proposal. Miss Sang then intervened, speaking of cultural concerns about how Salvatierra's company would handle relations with the local community in China once operations began. There was a subtlety in her question, an indirect way of asking if the company would respect Chinese customs or try to impose Western methods. Daniela caught the subtext and translated the question in a way that allowed Roberto to understand the true concern behind the diplomatic words. The meeting lasted 2.5 hours, and by the end, Daniela felt her brain was about to melt. She had translated thousands of words. She had navigated dozens of culturally sensitive moments, had clarified misunderstandings, and had proposed solutions when the two sides seemed to be reaching a stalemate. And when Mr. Wang finally said they were satisfied with the clarifications and would proceed to sign the contract, Daniela felt a wave of relief so strong that she thought her legs might give way. The screen went blank, and for a moment there was absolute silence in the room. Then Roberto began to applaud, and Mr. Mendoza and Javier joined him. That was extraordinary, Roberto said with a genuine smile. You didn't just translate, you also helped solve problems we didn't even know we had. Mes Contreras, you just saved this contract and, honestly, probably the reputation of the entire company. Daniela felt her face flush. She didn't know what to say. A simple thank you seemed inadequate, but it was all she could articulate. Marcela, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. Well, I suppose you got lucky this time. But Roberto, I still think we need to hire professional interpreters with appropriate credentials for future negotiations. We can't depend on. Her voice trailed off, but the disdain was unmistakable. Roberto looked at her with an expression Daniela couldn't quite decipher. It was part irritation, part something else. Marcela, I need to speak with you in my office now. And he left, leaving Daniela alone with Mr. Mendoza and Javier. The lawyer patted her on the shoulder. You did an incredible job. Seriously, I've worked with professional interpreters from the best agencies, and none would have handled that situation with such skill. Where on earth did you come from? The question was rhetorical, but Daniela answered anyway. From the streets, from needing to survive, from listening and learning, because there was no other option. And in those words, there was a truth so raw that Javier, the young analyst who had probably grown up with privileges and opportunities she never had, fell silent, processing the weight of what she had just admitted. Daniela spent the rest of the day in the building. Roberto asked her to stay to review other documents related to international contracts the company had pending. There was one with French investors that needed review, another with a German firm that wanted to establish a partnership, and a third with an Italian group interested in green technology. Daniela worked in a small cubicle that had been temporarily assigned to her, translating and annotating, her brain working at full speed, but she wasn't alone. She could feel stares. Employees on the 32nd floor passed by her cubicle and watched her with curiosity, whispering among themselves, "Who is she? Where did she come from? Why did Roberto hire her?" Rumors spread like wildfire, and Daniela could imagine the conversations in the break rooms, the speculations about whether she was someone important in disguise, if she had connections no one knew about, or if she had simply gotten lucky once. In the mid-afternoon, Marcela passed by her cubicle and stopped. Daniela looked up and saw an expression on the woman's face that sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't just antipathy, it was something darker, more calculated. "Enjoy this while it lasts," Marcela said softly, just loud enough for no one else to hear. "Because this isn't going to last. Roberto is being emotional now, grateful because you saved an emergency situation. But eventually, he'll realize that hiring someone like you was a mistake. Someone without education, without connections, without class. You don't belong in this world, and we all know it." The words were like daggers. Daniela felt something break inside her, not because the words were false, but because they resonated with her own deepest fears. Marcella was right about something. She didn't belong in this world of glass towers and meetings in conference rooms with panoramic views. She was a girl from the poor neighborhoods who had had a stroke of luck, and luck eventually ran out. But then she remembered something her mother had told her once after a particularly difficult day, when Daniela had cried because she couldn't afford university enrollment. Her mother had hugged her and whispered, "Class doesn't come from how much money you have or what school you went to. Class comes from how you treat people, how much you strive to be better every day, from not giving up when the world tells you that you're not enough." And at that moment, Daniela decided she wasn't going to let Marcella or anyone else make her feel less. She looked up and met Marcella's eyes. "You're right about something," Daniela said in a calm voice. "I don't come from your world. I didn't go to prestigious schools or have important connections, but I speak 6 languages that I learned on my own because I wanted to learn. And today I saved a contract that you couldn't fix with all your contacts and your expensive agencies. So maybe the problem isn't that I don't belong here. Maybe the problem is that you're threatened by someone who can do the job without needing the titles that took you years to get." Marcella's face turned red, and for a moment it looked like she was going to explode, but then she smiled. A cold, calculated smile. Brave speech. But words mean nothing in this world. The only thing that matters are results. And one swallow doesn't make a summer. We'll see how long you last. And she left, her heels clattering aggressively against the floor. That night, when Daniela finally returned to her apartment, she was completely exhausted. Her mother was waiting for her, awake, worried. "How did it go?" Doña Elena asked. Daniela collapsed on the worn sofa and told her everything, from the successful meeting to the confrontation with Marcella, the feeling of walking a tightrope between 2 worlds that never touched. Her mother listened in silence, and when Daniela finished, the older woman spoke with a voice full of a determination Daniela didn't expect. "Then you're going to prove you're innocent." "How?" Daniela asked in a broken voice. "I have no resources. I have no connections. I don't even know where to begin." Her mother took her by the shoulders and made her look into her eyes. "You have your brain, you have your determination, and you have the truth on your side. That's more than that woman has. Now stop feeling sorry for yourself and start thinking, who benefits from your failure? Who had access to your account? Who knew enough about the company's systems to plant that evidence?" Daniela took a deep breath. Her mother was right. Crying wouldn't solve anything. She needed to think. She needed to investigate. She needed to find proof that she had been framed. She began to mentally review everything she knew about the company's computer systems. She wasn't a technology expert, but she had paid attention when Javier explained how the internal network worked. Every email had metadata, IP addresses, timestamps. If someone had used her account without authorization, they had to have left some digital trace. But to access that information, she needed help from someone within the company, someone who had access to the system logs. And the only person she could think of who perhaps, just perhaps, would be willing to help her was Javier. The young analyst had been kind to her, had treated her as an equal instead of an intruder. It was a risk, but she had no other options. The next morning, Daniela woke up early and went to the cafe on the ground floor of the Salvatierra Corp building. She knew Javier usually bought his coffee there around 7:30 before going up to the office. She waited nervously, drinking cheap coffee she couldn't afford but needed as an excuse to be there. And then she saw him enter with his laptop bag and headphones around his neck. "Javier," she called before he could change his mind. He turned, surprised to see her. "Daniela, what are you doing here?" I thought. His voice trailed off awkwardly. Daniela approached him. "I need your help. I know you probably think I'm guilty of what I was accused of, but I'm not. Someone planted those emails in my account, and I need access to the system logs to prove it. Please, you're the only person who can help me." Javier looked at her for a long moment, and Daniela could see the conflict in his eyes. Helping her could cost him his job. "Daniela, that's unauthorized access. If I'm caught, I'll be in the same trouble as you. I can't risk my career. I'm sorry." And he started to walk away, but Daniela followed him. "You saw me work. You know I cared about that job, that I tried hard. Why would I throw all that away by leaking information? It doesn't make sense. And you know what else? It doesn't make sense that I supposedly had access to documents from departments where I never worked. Those emails were planted, and whoever did it left a trace. I just need someone to look at the server logs." Javier stopped and turned around. His expression had changed slightly. There was consideration now, and something else. Professional curiosity. "Maybe you're right about something. It seems strange that you had access to those files. The permission system is quite restrictive, but Daniela, even if I wanted to help you, I don't have authorization to access the email server logs. That's the IT department's domain, and they report directly to Marcella. Daniela's stomach sank. Of course, Marcella had control over the technology department. She had planned this perfectly, but then Javier continued, his voice softer now. However, I have a friend in IT. We graduated together. He owes me some favors. I can't promise you anything, but I can ask him if he notices anything strange in your account's logs. Nothing official, just an informal review. If he finds something, then we might have a basis to demand a formal investigation. Daniela felt a spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. Thank you, Javier. Seriously, you don't know what this means to me. Javier nodded, still looking uncomfortable. Don't thank me yet. And Daniela, if it turns out you really were the one who sent those emails, my friend is going to report it. I just want that to be clear. Daniela nodded. I understand. But it wasn't me, and the logs will prove it. The next 2 days were the longest of Daniela's life. She returned to her delivery job, though her old boss greeted her with mistrust after she had disappeared for weeks to work at Salvatierra's company. They gave her the most difficult routes, the longest hours, as punishment for leaving. Daniela accepted them without complaining. She needed the money, and she needed to stay busy so as not to go crazy, thinking about what Javier might or might not discover. She delivered packages under the scorching sun, climbed stairs in buildings without elevators, drove her motorcycle through congested streets, and all the time her mind kept replaying the scene in the boardroom. The way Marcella had smiled when she presented the false evidence, the way the board members had looked at her as if she were trash, the way Roberto, who had given her a chance, had been powerless to defend her against seemingly conclusive evidence. On the evening of the second day, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. Daniela, it's Javier. I need you to come to my apartment. I have information. His voice sounded tense, urgent. Daniela felt her heart race. Yes, he replied, but I can't talk about this on the phone. I'm going to send you my address. Come as soon as possible. Daniela took a taxi, a luxury she couldn't afford, but the urgency justified it. Javier's apartment was in a modern building in an upper-middle-class area, the kind of place where young professionals with good salaries lived. When Daniela arrived, Javier was waiting for her in the lobby. He looked nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to follow him. They went up silently to his apartment on the 7th floor. Once inside, Javier locked the door and closed the window blinds. Sitting in front of his laptop, there was another young man with thick glasses and a hoodie. This is Mateo, Javier said. He works in Salvatierra Corp's IT department. Mateo, tell her what you found. The young man adjusted his glasses and looked at Daniela with an expression that was part curiosity, part compassion. I reviewed your account's email server logs, Mateo began, and found several significant anomalies. First, the emails you supposedly sent with confidential information were all sent from an IP address that does not match any of the devices you used while working at the company. Second, the emails were sent during hours when you were not in the building. We have access logs that show exactly when you entered and left, and these emails were sent at 3 a.m. on dates when you didn't even have active access credentials. Daniela felt she could breathe for the first time in days. So, you can prove it wasn't me? Mateo nodded, but his expression remained serious. There's more. The IP address from which those emails were sent belongs to a computer in the building, specifically to a computer registered under Marcela Herrera's name. She used her own computer to access your account and send those emails, probably thinking no one would verify the record so meticulously. Javier intervened. Mateo also found something else. The attachments in those emails, the confidential documents, all have metadata that shows who originally downloaded them from the internal server. And guess who it was? Marcela, Daniela whispered. Exactly, Mateo confirmed. She downloaded documents from multiple departments, using her own administrator credentials. Then she used your compromised account to send them to external email addresses, which she probably also controls. It's a classic case of internal sabotage, but why would she do something so risky? Daniela asked. If she's discovered, she would also lose her job. Javier and Mateo exchanged glances. That's where things get more interesting, Javier said. Mateo did a little more investigation. Nothing illegal. He just looked for public information. It turns out Marcela has been in conversations with Venture Global, one of Salvatierra Corp's main competitors. There are public records of meetings, photographs at corporate events. Our theory is that she planned to destroy your reputation and create chaos in the company to then offer her services to the competition, taking valuable information with her. Daniela processed this information. It all made sense. Now, Marcella had seen Daniela as a threat, someone Roberto was beginning to value and who could potentially expose Marcella's inefficiencies. So she decided to eliminate Daniela while simultaneously stealing information for her new employer. It was a calculated and malicious plan. "We need to take this to Roberto," Daniela said. Matteo shook his head quickly. "Not so simple. If we reveal that I accessed these records without official authorization, I could be fired or even face legal charges. We need to find a way for this information to come to light through appropriate channels." Javier leaned back in his chair, thinking, what if Daniela formally requests an internal investigation? She has the right to defend herself against the accusations. If she files an official complaint, the Human Resources Department is obliged to conduct a complete audit, including reviewing system logs, and once they start looking, they will find exactly what Matteo found. Matteo considered this. It could work, but Marcella has influence in human resources. She could also block or delay the investigation unless we take this directly to the board of directors, Daniela said. Suddenly, her mind was working fast now, connecting pieces. Don Ernesto, the chairman of the board, he seemed genuinely concerned about the company's security. If I present him with preliminary evidence suggesting that the real internal threat is Marcella, he cannot ignore it. It is his responsibility to investigate. Javier nodded slowly. But you need access to him, and after what happened, I doubt he'll agree to meet with you. Then I'll go to his house, Daniela said with a determination that surprised even herself. Public information. Executive addresses are in archived corporate records. I'm going to knock on his door, and I'm going to make him listen to me. Matteo looked at her with renewed respect. You're braver than I thought, but you'll need documentation. I can't give you the logs directly, because that would incriminate me, but I can create an anonymous report summarizing the findings without revealing exactly how they were obtained. It will be enough to justify an official investigation. That night, Daniela barely slept. Matteo sent her the anonymous report via an encrypted email service. It was a 7-page document detailing the inconsistencies in IP addresses, time discrepancies, and public connections between Marcella and Venture Global. It wasn't definitive legal evidence, but it was enough to sow reasonable doubt and demand a deeper investigation. The next morning, Daniela dressed in the same white blouse and black pants she had worn for her first meeting at Salvatierra Corp. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone different from the girl who had entered that building weeks ago. There was a hardening in her eyes, a determination forged in humiliation and injustice. She was not going to give up. She was not going to let Marcella win. Don Ernesto's house was in an exclusive neighborhood, a 2-story mansion with perfectly maintained gardens and a fountain in the front. Daniela felt out of place walking down that street where every house was probably worth millions of dollars. But she took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A housekeeper opened the door and looked at her suspiciously. I need to speak with Don Ernesto, Daniela said. It's urgent, and it has to do with Salvatierra Corp. The housekeeper frowned. He doesn't receive visits without an appointment, but Daniela didn't move. Please, tell him Daniela Contreras is here, and that I have evidence that the company is in real danger from an internal threat. Tell him if he doesn't listen to me now, he will regret it when Venture Global uses our confidential information against us. There was a long moment of waiting. Finally, the housekeeper returned, and with an expression of disapproval, motioned for Daniela to enter. Don Ernesto was waiting for her in his study, a room lined with books and an antique mahogany desk. The man looked at her with a mix of surprise and annoyance. Miss Contreras, you have a lot of nerve showing up here after what happened. This better be important. Daniela sat in the chair he offered and placed the printed report on the desk. It is. I was framed, and I have proof. Don Ernesto read the report in silence. Daniela watched his face as he processed the information. His eyebrows furrowed. Zaka's furrowed more and more. His expression shifted from skepticism to genuine concern. This is very serious, he said finally. If true, it means we have been trusting someone who is actively betraying us. But this report is anonymous. It has no signature, no official seals. How do I know this isn't something you fabricated to clear your name? Because you can verify it yourself, Daniela replied. Order a complete forensic audit of the email systems. Hire an external cybersecurity firm if you don't trust your own IT department. The logs don't lie. The IP addresses, the timestamps, the file metadata, it's all there. And if they find I'm wrong, I accept any legal consequence. But if they find I'm right, Marcela didn't just destroy me. She's destroying the entire company. Don Ernesto leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers intertwined under his chin. Why should I believe you? I didn't know you until a month ago. Marcela has been with the company for years. She has an impeccable record. Precisely why she's the perfect traitor, Daniela replied. No one suspects her. She has access to everything. She has everyone's trust, and she's probably been planning this for a long time, waiting for the perfect moment to jump to the competition with valuable information. The old man studied her for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. I will order the audit, but it will be completely confidential. Only I and the external security firm will have access to the initial results. If the audit proves your accusations are false, you will not only lose any chance of ever working in this industry again, but you will face defamation lawsuits. Do you understand that? Daniela nodded. I understand, and I accept it because I know the truth. The next 5 days were torture. Daniela returned to her delivery routine, each day wondering if the audit would reveal what Mateo had found, or if Marcela had somehow covered her tracks well enough. Javier sent her occasional messages asking if there was any news, but Daniela had nothing to report. The silence was deafening, and then on the evening of the 5th day, she received a call. It was Don Ernesto's personal secretary. The board of directors requests your presence tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the boardroom. Your attendance is mandatory. The voice was neutral, giving no clues about what they had discovered. Daniela barely slept that night, her mind oscillating between hope and terror. When she arrived at the Salvatierra Court building the next morning, she noticed something strange. There were 2 additional security guards in the lobby, and an atmosphere of tension permeated the air. Employees walked quickly, whispering in small groups. They looked nervously towards the elevators. Something had happened. Daniela went up to the top floor, her heart beating so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The boardroom was full. Don Ernesto presided from the head of the table. Roberto was there, looking exhausted but hopeful. Mr. Mendoza and other members of the board occupied their usual places, and in a corner were 2 people Daniela didn't recognize, a man and a woman in dark suits and severe expressions that screamed lawyers or investigators. What was missing was Marcela. Miss Contreras, Don Ernesto began, and his tone was completely different from their last encounter. We owe you an apology. The cybersecurity audit we ordered has confirmed every one of the allegations in the report you brought us. The emails were indeed sent from Marcela Herrera's computer using access credentials she obtained illegally. Furthermore, the investigation revealed something we didn't expect. She had been exfiltrating confidential company information for the past 6 months, long before you started working here. Roberto stood up, and Daniela could see genuine emotion on his face. Daniela, not only are you innocent, you saved us from a threat we didn't even know existed. If you hadn't had the courage to come and demand an investigation, Marcela would have continued stealing information until she decided to leave for the competition, probably destroying contracts and relationships that took us years to build. Mr. Vargas, the board member who had been so quick to condemn her, cleared his throat. Miss Contreras, on behalf of the board, we offer our sincerest apologies for having doubted you. We acted precipitously based on evidence that seemed conclusive, but that we did not adequately verify. It was a serious error in judgment. Where is Marcela now? Daniela asked. Her voice was firmer than she expected. One of the investigators replied, she was arrested early this morning. She faces charges of theft of corporate secrets, computer fraud, and conspiracy to harm the company. The evidence against her is overwhelming. Additionally, we have notified Venture Global of her involvement, and they have terminated all conversations with her. Her career in this industry is over. Daniela nodded, a wave of relief so intense it almost made her dizzy. Justice. Finally, justice. But Don Ernesto wasn't finished. Miss Contreras, the board of directors has extensively discussed your situation. We recognize that not only did we treat you unfairly, but we lost someone with exceptional skills due to our own negligence. Therefore, we would like to offer you something. He paused, making sure he had her full attention. We want to offer you the position of Director of International Relations. It's an executive position with a commensurate salary, full benefits, and the authority to build your own team. The position Marcela held, but with a broader scope that recognizes your unique linguistic abilities. Daniela was speechless. Director, an executive position. It was more than she had dreamed of, even in her most ambitious fantasies. I don't have a university degree, she managed to say. I don't have the traditional credentials. Don Ernesto smiled, and it was a genuine smile. Miss Contreras, you have just demonstrated something that no degree can teach. You demonstrated integrity, courage, and the ability to solve complex problems under immense pressure. That is worth more than any diploma. And furthermore, part of your compensation package will include support for you to complete your formal education if you wish. The company will pay for any university program or professional certifications you want to obtain. Roberto approached her. Daniela, please accept. We need people like you. People who genuinely care about doing the right job, not just about appearances. People who don't give up when the world tells them they don't belong. Daniela felt tears burn her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy, not pain. She thought of her mother, of the sleepless nights, caring for her, of the medical bills that accumulated. She thought of all the years, working multiple jobs, learning languages alone, because there was no other option. She thought of every time someone had made her feel less for not having the right credentials or the appropriate connections. I accept, she finally said, her voice clear and strong. But I have one condition. I want the Human Resources Department to review its hiring policies. I want the company to create scholarship programs and opportunities for talented people who do not have access to traditional education. I want others like me to have a real opportunity, not just pretty words about diversity and inclusion. Don Ernesto nodded. Done. You can lead that program yourself if you want. It will be part of your portfolio as director. The following days were a whirlwind of changes. Daniela signed contracts, met with the Human Resources Department, began building her team. Javier immediately accepted her offer to join her department as a senior analyst. Even Mateo, after some delicate conversations about how to protect his role in discovering the truth, received official recognition and a substantial bonus for his work, although publicly, the discovery was attributed to the external audit to protect him from retaliation. Daniela moved with her mother to a larger apartment in a better neighborhood, near an excellent hospital where Doña Elena could receive the best treatment for her kidney condition. She hired a part-time nurse to help with the care. She bought appropriate professional clothing, although she never forgot where she came from, and many days she still preferred the simplicity of a white blouse and black pants over the designer suits she could now afford. 3 months later, Daniela was in her office, a spacious room overlooking the city, reviewing proposals to expand the company's operations in Asian and European markets. Her team had grown to 12 people, a mix of experienced professionals and young talents she had discovered in unexpected places, brilliant people who just needed an opportunity. Roberto entered without knocking, something he now did regularly, as they had developed a close working relationship based on mutual respect. I have news, he said with a smile. The Chinese contract you saved. The investors are so impressed with our work that they want to triple their investment, and specifically asked that you handle all future negotiations. They said they had never worked with someone who understood both the language and the cultural context so deeply. Daniela smiled. I'll schedule a video conference for next week. And Roberto, that scholarship program I proposed. We already have the first 20 applications from talented young people from low-income neighborhoods. Some speak 3, 4 languages they learned on their own. Others have skills in programming or analysis that they developed out of necessity. They are all brilliant, and they all deserve a chance. Roberto nodded. We will review each application personally. And then he added something softer. You know, sometimes I think about what would have happened if that day you hadn't overheard my call with the Chinese investors. If you had simply delivered the package and left, we would have lost the contract, for sure. But more than that, we would have lost the opportunity to meet you, to learn from you, to do things better. Daniela looked out the window at the city stretching below, the same streets she used to ride on her delivery motorcycle, carrying packages from one place to another. The view was different from the 32nd floor, but she would never forget what it looked like from below. That perspective, that memory of struggle and humility, was what kept her centered, what made her better at her job. It wasn't just about languages or multi-million-dollar contracts. It was about understanding that behind every business there were people, and those people deserved respect, no matter which floor of the building they came from. And so, the delivery person, who was once invisible to the business world, became one of the company's most valuable executives, not because she forgot where she came from, but precisely because she never forgot. Her story became a legend within Salvatierra Corp, a reminder that talent can be found in the most unexpected places, and that a person's true value is not measured in university degrees or family connections, but in their determination, their integrity, and their willingness to get up every time the world tries to knock them down. Daniela Contreras had come to deliver a package and ended up delivering something much more valuable, a lesson in courage, justice, and the transformative power of giving people the opportunity they deserve.